6 years. That's a strong portion of your life, isn't it? 6 years.
It's like when I went there for the first year, like I didn't anticipate the connection I would get with everyone, like the bonds I would get with like all my friends.
He went to New York and he just messaged. He was like, "This is not a real place."
I got there and like it's like London, but like on another level.
So if you give it that extra bit, and you do give it absolute beans when you're there, on the flip side, you go away from the summer afterwards going, "That was immense."
Yeah, it's something, we're in this really unique situation where we've got this opportunity to put a really positive stamp on participants' summers and also lives.
Is a lot easier, as opposed to say if you just invited someone completely new in and stuff.
So throwing yourself in the deep end, it is similar to camp. Like the more you do it, the more you'll get like comfortable with it as well.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, have we started filming now? Because that is an absolutely perfect little intro there. You can talk about getting out of the comfort zone and everything. No, that's amazing. Well, no, all good. Well, I was going to say, talking about going out of comfort zone and everything like that's probably a cool little way to get straight into it. So first off, mate, thanks for staying and having a little chat with us.
I've got a big passion for it. So
yeah, no, definitely. I thought it would be really cool to kind of get you on, especially now you're back. So I obviously know you. I'm sure people who have spoke to you on the phone and seen you on different videos will recognize you. But do you want to kind of give just a bit of a introduction on who you are, what you do with camp leaders, and like what camp you went to as well, actually?
So I've been working for the company for nearly 4 years, and I absolutely love it. So I went to Camp Kindering, went there for 6 summers. So I went there from
6.
So went there from 2014 till 2019, and
wow,
absolutely loved it. It was class.
And that's only up to sort of pandemic, isn't it? So
so last summer was the last summer we sent everybody to camp pretty much, so 2019, and then this summer we're able to send just over 2,000 people. So
6 years. What kept you going back 6 years? That's a strong portion of your life, isn't it? 6 years.
It's just like the connection you get with everyone when you go there. Like when I went there for the first year, like I didn't anticipate the connection I would get with everyone, like the bonds I would get with like all my friends, and you get properly like stuck into it as well, like in regards to with the children, like they look up to you like role models, and it's such like a rewarding feeling.
Absolutely.
And in a weird way, I think I would have felt guilty not going back at least a second summer. And people will find this as well, like once you start going to camp, you'll want to keep going back, and then your whole like year is around going back to camp, whether you want to keep going back or not. And I always just kept the months of June, July, August free, because I knew
that was always your
from 2014, 2019, I was always going to keep going back. So I'd say like the people there, the traditions, the children were amazing too. And I couldn't see myself not going back for that many years.
What state is it again?
So it's New York. So it's upstate New York.
Oh, amazing. Was that sort of one of those places where building up, you were kind of like, oh, do you know, I wouldn't mind being in New York and everything?
Well, when I first saw it was in New York, I'm from the countryside. So I was just like, this is crazy. So when I can always remember I flew into New York JFK, when I went from New York JFK to the city to like make my way to camp, when I was in New York City, like I can remember sending a photo to my dad, and he was just like, that's crazy. And I can remember just looking up at the skyscrapers thinking, I've come from like a tiny village town where everybody knows each other, to now being in New York City. But I absolutely loved it. And one of the cool things with where our camp was located, like we were an hour and a half away from New York City on a train. Easily. So you can probably imagine on days off, there's worse places to spend your days off. So that was incredible too. And I got to see pretty much everything in New York. So
what a place. Do you know what? I'll have to end up even just finding the message, but my 2 brothers have gone to camp for the first time this year. And it was the first time my brother had ever been to America, let alone New York. And he went to New York and he just messaged. He was like, this is not a real place. It's just crazy, isn't it?
It is so, like, it's overwhelming to begin with, but like in a good way. So I can always remember when I got there and like, it's like London, but like on another level, because obviously people watching this, listening to this, they're going to know what London's like, with everyone just like in tunnel vision, just straight looking down, but then it's like that multiplied by 20. But it is incredible because you always see New York on the movies, like on Home Alone, I always see that popping around, and then just being there was honestly incredible. And then going to camp was
for sure
unforgettable as well.
Yeah, it ends up being one of those places, doesn't it, that most people tend to start and finish there. I mean, obviously you can fly in and out from anywhere, but that tends to be one of the central places, isn't it? Like if you go to camp and you're on the East Coast, you're likely going to be going to New York, aren't you?
It's always the same. Like most people always fly into New York, and then before they go traveling after camp, they always have like their last night with all their friends they've made at camp in New York City. So yeah, most of the time I would usually just go there first when I got there, and then last night before I went to my travels, but occasionally we go on days off too. And amazing.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to touch on a bit now, was the fact that this podcast is going to be going out more towards when people are going to be finishing camp and kind of having that time where you're looking back. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be going to New York and stuff soon, but looking back at your time at camp, and you've got a hell of a lot of experience to look back on, considering you've had 6 years of it. You get some crazy memories, don't you? Ones which proper stick with you. So the main thing I wanted to pick your brain about first was your experience at camp and the type of memories that you have. Do you have any sort of ones that really stick out in your head where you kind of go, I can recall it so easy?
Yeah, there's probably a couple. There's two that come straight to my head from my second summer in 2015. So people watching this, obviously if they've been to camp and it's near the end of it now, color war, also known as Olympics for me. So you have like two teams, and usually it's like two different colors, so it's red and blue. And at my camp it was two countries, so it was Norway versus Peru. I was on Norway's team, and you get 4 people on each team, like leading the whole of camp for like the 3 or 4 days worth of color war, also known as Olympics. One of the memories was getting tapped. So one of the ways they would do it is our assistant director and director, usually when the whole camp's together, they would walk around and everyone would be eyeballing them, like looking who they're going to. Because the way they would do it is they'd just tap you on the shoulder, and then you'd know then you've got like Olympic leader. And mine was in the dining hall, and you can probably imagine everyone was in the dining hall in 2015. And every single, especially the campers, because it's a huge deal for them, they're just watching them like go round and round and round. And then eventually they come to me and like they tap me on the shoulder. And I wasn't, all the kids were like, "Oh, Matt, you're definitely going to get Olympic leader." And like me being modest, I was thinking, I definitely won't. So I had a full mouth of chicken salad in my mouth. And like, there's a very funny photo
Start
of me.
of most good stories.
Yeah, just like mouthful full of foods, just really like jumping up and down, ecstatic. But it was such a cool experience because like all the kids were like hugging you, saying congratulations, like you really enjoy it. So that was one that really stuck out. And then at the end of Olympics, because it was an extra day, because like rain called it off, so it was quite a long period of time, we won Olympics. So like when we won it, like all the kids would run to you too. So I think those are the 2 core memories of like what would stand out for me being at camp.
That's a cool one as well, because I spoke to Chris, I think last week, when we were chatting about summer camp events and like colour war and everything like that, Olympics. They are things that they stick with you because they're so distant from sort of real life type of thing, isn't it? That it is one of those ones it's hard to forget.
Yeah, it is crazy because if you go home, and obviously when people are watching this, you go home and you try and explain what it was like and like what color war was like, they'll be like, I don't really get it, which is crazy. But it just turns into this like 3 or 4 day really competitive thing, and you get properly like into it, and it's something I absolutely loved, but it's very hard to explain. But for sure, that's something that will stand out for me. I think just in general, obviously those are a couple of memories, but just having the kids say how much they appreciate you being there and being like proper rewarding feeling, I think that was one thing that always stuck with me and made me want to go back each summer too, and made me want to do that extra like 10% every day, because the children will realize it. And I can always remember my first year, I did give my all, but I didn't give that extra 10%. And then I can remember my second summer when I did get Olympics, obviously paid off, and I got a lot more from it just because I gave more into it, and I absolutely loved it. It was great.
it's such a cool common theme, actually. Everyone says this about summer camp, and I do as well. Is what you kind of put into it, you get out, don't you? So if you give it that extra bit, and you do give it absolute beans when you're there, on the flip side, you go away from the summer afterwards going, that was immense.
Yeah, you've got to. I think one thing with summer camp is you've just got to not be afraid to embarrass yourself, just jump in the deep end. Because for me, I wasn't used to before I went to camp, being used to just running around with kids, for example, playing basketball and throwing it like a netball and then just joking around with it. Because it's hilarious, because like with me, I was never used to playing basketball, and when I got to camp, I was literally throwing it like a netball. And you've got like 10 and 11-year-olds running around, joking around, being 10 times better than you. But it definitely is. I think when you go to camp, and a lot of people watching this have already been, and they'll know what I'm saying, is just the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And yeah, it's a very rewarding feeling.
It's kind of a nice segue, actually, because one thing I did want to then ask about was the fact that summer camp is such an experience upon itself that kind of the people who have been to camp, I've got this shared understanding because of this shared experience. And you get things, don't you? Which I think people who haven't been to camp, it is very hard to describe, a bit like some of the events. Have you got any other ones like that where you sort of like, if you've been to camp, you get it, but if you haven't been to camp, it's hard to understand or even to describe it to someone?
Yeah, when I think it wasn't exact one thing, but it was over a span of a couple of days, was when I was a group leader for the first time in 2017, I took my kids to Boston.
Oh, nice.
And not necessarily planned the whole event, but made sure everything ran smoothly. And I can remember when I came back, I chatted to the parents and also the kids, and they all said that obviously the campus had an amazing time.
Nice.
The parents obviously then said, thank you so much for looking after my children for those 3 or 4 days when we went to Boston. So I think that was a very rewarding feeling as well, just because you can probably imagine how stressful it is sometimes going from camp to quite a relatively big city. So I'd say that was another one that would stand out for me. So yeah, definitely being elected group leader as well, because I had a few summers just as general counsellor, and then people watching this, if they've been to camp, they're going to know after general counsellor, sometimes you want to be a group leader. Getting moved up to that position was quite rewarding too.
Absolutely.
Especially being there for a few summers. So, and then just doing that first summer as a group leader, I think that was quite rewarding, and hearing some of the senior staff members saying how much of a good job you've done too, I think that's rewarding, because as a group leader, there's a lot that goes into it in regards to planning even activities, where it's not necessarily the ones that are really renowned activities you'll do. They're quite different. So you have to be really creative with it. And I think that's something I absolutely love too, because if you do an activity where they might not necessarily do throughout the day, and they come away from it, the kids, and they absolutely love it and they're buzzing, and it's the last thing they'll remember throughout the day because it's an even activity, then I think that was one big thing as well. I love taking time to put time into some really creative and unique even activities, which they loved. So slip and slides, kickball, that was a crazy one. So we had you obviously had a kickball court, and then you'd have a massive slide at the end of it, so they get to it, and then you have to slide onto first base, slide onto second base. So that was incredible. And then blind volleyball. So some people might know this as well. That's quite a cool one.
This.
So you put this is one thing we came up with. So you put towels across the net, and then you can only see the ball obviously when it's in the air.
Yeah.
And sometimes we turn the lights off when the ball's up in the air. So that was quite cool too. And I think that was again another thing I absolutely loved. The children coming away from even activities buzzing from it, because there's a lot of planning that goes into it. So that was another thing I like doing.
Yeah, and I think that's you mentioned the word sort of rewarding a few times, and that's the cool part, especially when you put a lot of effort in, isn't it? Creating some of these things where when they come off, and those games which until you've been to camp you go, wow, what is that? But once you've then done it and you've put the effort in making it happen, it is rewarding, isn't it? Because you see the kids are like, yeah, this is amazing. Yeah,
and it's one of those things as well. I think with summer camp, going a little bit off topic, is when you work with the children, it kind of opens up your eyes to be like, oh, you'll sit back a little bit and think, I never knew I could actually work with children. And that's one thing as well, is there's so many staff members that I've worked with that have now become teachers. So I think that's another thing that broadens your horizon and opens up your eyes a little bit to what you can actually do.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a good thing with summer camp in general. It kind of opens up your eyes to maybe what you want to do as a career. So
definitely. And I think with that as well, because like you've said, when it opens you up to trying these new things and attempting it and everything, you sort of grow as a person, don't you? And you only grow as a person if you go through the tough times. Yeah. And let's be honest, there can be some of those at summer camp as well, where you might be knackered. You could end up just being a little irritable because it's boiling hot or anything like that. Can you remember some of the tough times for you, what they were, and like what did you do to kind of battle against some of those to get through? Because I mean, you've done 6 years at camp, so you must have had a few.
Yeah, I think at times you've just got to sit back and think kids will be kids. Because I can remember, and it was probably the same with you occasionally when you were little, that sometimes you didn't follow certain rules.
I'm still a nightmare
now,
it's
the same with me, but a lot of the time, like during the day, if the children weren't at a certain activity when they had to be, which might make you late for another activity, then it's kind of like a domino effect, because you'll have the activity leaders on the next activity being like, Matt, why aren't they here on time? So you'd have
it's not my fault.
Exactly. But you'd have that occasionally. But one thing that I always thought of at the end of the day, if that was to happen, with America especially, the kids' kind of like education is quite strict.
Yeah.
So they, at the end of the day, come to camp to have fun. So I think when sometimes you do get stressed at camp, that was one thing that I always stepped back and thought, you know what, I was like that when I was younger. They're just generally here to have fun. But I think one of the things that I would do, especially, which is a little bit of advice as well, is if you ever have days which are sometimes long, is especially make the most of your activities off, make the most of your days off as well, just because you need to recharge your batteries. Working with children for a whole summer in the heat is quite exhausting. So yeah, definitely my advice there would just be to make the most of your activities off, days off. And just sometimes sit back and just remember what you were like when you were younger.
Definitely. So. You need to, don't you? You need to. And I think that's a cool piece of advice, that like you do have to make the most of your time off. And it doesn't necessarily mean kind of go and do absolutely everything you need to do all in one time. If you need to chill out, go to the staff room, watch a film, because there's a lot of other people that will be in the same boat as you as well, won't they?
Yeah, exactly. And it's for sure one of those things, really. And I think you have to notice that, and you have to be visually aware of your energy levels, and when the kids want to relax on like activities off or like downtime, definitely make the most of that. Play cards with them, play a little bit of football with them, and that's one thing I made sure I did all the time.
So, having been there for 6 years, you must have worked with so many different types of people, and a lot of the time when people say once you've been to camp friends are for life, aren't they? Have you had those sort of ones where you've got those friendships that you still chat to now and everything?
One thing that I always think of is, not to put this in a bad context, but so many of my friends at camp wouldn't necessarily fall into my friends group at home. Yeah. And I'm sure you'd probably think the same too. And I think that's one thing I absolutely love, just because I have loads of different friend groups, like personality groups as well. So I think that's one big thing. And honestly, the amount of times I meet up with my camp friends, even still like not going back to camp now, I still meet up with them on like a monthly basis. It's incredible. I think you get that unique bond when you're at camp, because you're with them every single day.
Absolutely.
Throughout the summer. So I know you're only with them for say 8 to 10 weeks, but they literally become your best friends. Yeah. Which is incredible. And one thing that I'm doing in end of August is I'm going to a wedding, but at camp. So it's a camp wedding with 2 people that met at camp, but they're both from the UK. They've got a kid now. So that'll be the first time I'm going back to camp since 2019. So amazing. I'm honestly buzzing for it. And the amount of people I'm going to see that I haven't seen for quite a while too, it's going to be incredible. So that's one thing. Like the 2 that are getting married, I haven't really seen them for a while, but still got an invitation. Shows how like strong the bond is when you're at camp.
It is like a long impact as well, isn't it? Like you said, the amount of time that you do spend with someone or a group of people, and an experience which is as intense as what it is as well. It does kind of bring that friendship together.
Yeah, it definitely does. You've made a good point there, just because especially if you're co-counselors, or say if you're co-activity leaders at camp, you've got to be there for them as well. Like let's say, for instance, if you've got a co-counselor who's maybe having a bit of an off day, that might be tired, that didn't have a very good night's sleep just because maybe a camper was up all night, maybe unwell or had bad dreams. it's a case of being there for them too, and just being aware if they're quite tired. It could be, yeah, hey, I'll sit in for you for this activity if you want to maybe have an activity off. And again, that'll grow your bond, your friendship. So for sure, you go through some hard times with your co-staff members at camp, but at the end of it, you'll have like a better connection as well, and better friendship.
So many similar personalities, isn't it? One that stands out to me, I remember, was in Australia at one point with a good mate of mine, and I'd worked with quite a few people who were Australian who I went to camp with and stuff. And it just happened to be loads of other people were all traveling at the time. And you get people that when at camp, everyone's in that traveling mindset, wanting to have a great time. And before we knew it, we kind of just threw it out there just on social media saying, hey, look, if anyone's in Bondi on this weekend, I remember it too well, actually, because it was the weekend Liverpool lost the Champions League final. But anyway, I just remember throwing it out there and saying, we'll all catch up. And next thing we know, there was like 15, 16 of us who all met in America from 6 or 7 different countries, all seemed to come together in Australia, having like an amazing time as though we've never been away. But those sort of things do happen again, don't they?
Honestly. And the one thing is with camp people, like, first of all, they've made that effort to go from wherever they're from the UK, all over Europe, Australia, New Zealand, to go to camp. So they're obviously really outgoing, adventurous people anyway. So let's just say, for instance, if I said to a group of my camp friends, let's meet up in London this weekend, if they're free, more than likely they will, just because they're really adventurous. And I think that's the group of friendships and like personalities you do meet at camp. And that's probably why you stay friends for so many years, just because you will literally travel a very long way just to see them for a day or two. And I think that goes a long way as well. For
sure. It makes a big impact on you, doesn't it? Like the people that you meet. But I think camp as a whole has a huge impact, doesn't it? And it's not just one in regards to, I've had a few good memories. It can kind of really impact you as a person as well. And I think that's one thing I'd love to touch on, is just kind of get your input on how it affected you as a person. Do you feel like it changed you? What did you pick up at camp?
Yeah, it's one thing I always say to people on the phone is, when I got home, when Dad picked me up from the airport pretty much straight away, he sort of changed me a little bit in regards to my independence. So for instance, because I went to camp when I was very young, I would never just go and put all my washing in the washing machine ever, really, or just go and clean up my room. And that was something I did pretty much straight away, just because when you're at camp, you're cleaning like your bunk areas with the children, you're doing your own washing as well. So that was one big thing that he picked up straight away. And I think just confidence as well, of just being, look, I've looked after a group of 30 children for the summer. I can go away and do this. I can go away and do that. So definitely like independence, self-confidence, and also just being aware that it is a big world out there, and there's so many more opportunities in regards to opportunities in the UK, opportunities abroad, working abroad too. So I picked up on so many things, and I think it's one massive thing everyone should do if they do have their summers free. Go and do it, because you will have an amazing time, but then also you're going to gain so much more independence, life skills, confidence, and just awareness that there's a big world out there to go and do a lot of things like summer camp in other countries as well.
That's a really cool thing which you've just mentioned there, is kind of like the range of things as well, because we'll touch on the professional side in a bit and everything. Because look, I mean, here we are working for sort of camp leaders, doing a podcast about it. So obviously it has an effect professionally, which is class. There's so many avenues. But then on that personal side as well, I thought it was really cool you mentioned some of those life skills, the confidence. You have to deal with new situations. You have to deal with tough situations. There's so much, isn't there, that you probably, when you're looking back now on your time at camp, and hopefully people will kind of reflect as they're leaving camp, that even when things were a bit tough, you're coming away with so much, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think it's just one of those things where you've just got to get on with it at summer camp, because you're put in that really high position and responsibility that you have to go away and look after these children for the summer, and they're kind of like your own. Absolutely. So you do get put in that tough situation, but you adapt to it really quickly, and you come away from it such a more confident, like stronger person. So yeah, definitely that was one big thing. And I always mention to everyone, and especially sometimes parents
Yeah.
on the phone. Like parents might say to me sometimes, like, what's my son or daughter going to get from it? And I always tell that story of, look, I went to camp. My dad realized straight away how much confidence I have, independence too. And it's always something for sure I will say to parents, just let them go and do their own thing. Because quite a lot of the time, which is understandable, if parents do have children, they want to try and wrap them up in cotton wool sometimes, but definitely just go and let them do their thing, and you'll realize it's such a positive thing when they come back.
For sure. Do you feel like, and it's a bit of a heavier question, do you feel like it changed your outlook?
Yeah, I would. Good question.
And whether that's on life or your opinion on how you approach things or approach people or situations?
I would say positivity, 110%.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Just because you're there with so many other positive people.
Yeah.
And when I came home, there might have been occasions where I'd have got down because of like very small things. Yeah. But then at camp, there's so many things that could get you down, but you just go away and just go and play like activities with them and just get out of your head. And definitely it made me such more like a positive person. I had like a much more positive outlook on life. And then from that, just in regards to what I wanted to do, I thought to myself, you know what, I love it. I've been doing it year after year. Why not have a look at job opportunities in the summer camp world, and then stumbled across camp leaders. So.
Well, that's the absolute perfect segue.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
I gotta go.
I was thinking in my head, that's the next.
I was there. So. He's done my job for me there. That's the perfect transition. Take the mic. Yeah. It's the next one was going to be, because you touched on it a little prior as well, the fact that obviously can have a huge impact professionally. I mean, here we are and everything, chatting about it and genuinely believing in it as well. We're not just here because you're like, oh, it just pays the bills. You do it because you believe in it. Yeah. I'm guessing that's one of the biggest professional impacts it's had on you, isn't it? In terms of, first off, directly, here you are in your career sort of thing.
Yeah, like I think one of the big things, so I deal with a lot of people that sign up and have like that initial conversation with me. So that's one thing I tend to do. And I can always remember my first year in 2014, the way it usually worked for me, well, the way it did work for me, was my sister applied for it, and then lo and behold decided last minute she didn't want to do it. So then I ended up going ahead with it through camp leaders. And I can always remember my initial conversation that I had with one of the staff team members here. And it was one thing I needed that little like push. Absolutely. To be like, you want to do it, just go and sort of do it. And it's one thing as well, like you need that push, you need that extra information. And now I'm in that position where I can turn around and say, we've sent hundreds of people to camp, and if it wasn't for me and the team with our like initial conversations, they may not have done it. If we didn't go ahead and go out our way to call them, they may not have done this. So it's something, we're in this really unique situation where we've got this opportunity to put a really positive stamp on participants' summers and also lives, and like positive impact on it. So that's one big thing I get from it, from each phone call, especially if they decide, you know what, I'm going to do it, and they sign up with you over the phone. It's something after the phone call, you think, wow, I've made them take that extra step. They're going to go to America, work abroad for the first time too. So to be able to now be in that position, it's so rewarding for me. And it's something that obviously we're not sitting here selling something we don't believe in. It's not like we're trying to sell curtains. It's something we've both done. We know how positively impacted it's had on our lives and our summers too. So yeah, I absolutely love it. And it's something for sure I can't really see myself doing anything else.
I think that's the cool thing. And it's even like in life, isn't it, that where it's sort of the opportunity comes up at the right time. And it's one of those ones where I'd always say to people, listen, have the conversation with the likes of yourself, the likes of Chris, anyone in the camp leaders team, because people aren't coming at it from a business perspective going, oh, well, this is what's included, that's what's included. You'll end up talking about the experience more than anything, won't you? You talk about the real stories, and it's like, that's because you've genuinely had those stories. They're the things where you kind of go, come on, have them yourself, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think one thing a lot of the time is, especially when they come on, they might be worried about going out to camp on their own for the first time, how they get from the airport to camp itself, what if I don't find a placement? And all these things is something that always went through my head when it was my first summer. So I'm in that really unique situation where I can reassure them and be like, hey, I felt like this. I was nervous. I feel like anybody that goes to camp for the first time, I don't care if you're the most outgoing person, even then you're going to be relatively nervous just because you're going abroad for the first time. You're meeting loads of new staff members you've never met before. You're at a camp you've never been to before. And I think being able to be put in that situation where I am every day of chatting to new participants that sign up and just reassuring them, it is, I absolutely love it. You get that sense of like rewardness when you finish it as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned there, it's one of those where, say, people do have those nerves in the beginning if they're first going to camp, but got to remember this is a well-trodden path, isn't it? Like 20 plus years ourselves, camps have been going for decades longer in America. Everyone's going to go through that sort of those, what's the best way of describing it, sort of those teething problems, aren't they, in the beginning?
Definitely. But it's something for sure. I wake up every day excited for it, because
absolutely.
Every day you're going to change like multiple people's summers, lives, and that's something I strive on. And I absolutely love chatting about my own personal experiences, what I went through and what they will experience too.
Did you know about any of these types of opportunities kind of within like the industry we come under, sort of cultural exchange and then travel in general? Did you know about any of these? Because I'll be honest, prior to, I didn't.
Yeah.
And then you look at it and you realize it's a whole industry, a whole sector where it's about making an impact and inspiring people.
No, so to be honest, I didn't. So I touched on it previously. So my sister decided to sign up for it, and then just didn't go through with it, and then said, Matt, I think you'd be really good at this. And I was from such a small countryside that nobody, I don't think before I did it, ever really went off their own back and thought, you know what, I'm going to go and work in America. It wasn't something that I would just go away and search for. I was 19, I was relatively young. So when I went ahead and did something like this, then that's when I came back. I started to search different job opportunities abroad. But I think back then you didn't have this, like the TikToks and how big Instagram is now, you didn't have that either.
Yeah.
So I think you had to rely on you having your own ambition and not finding things pop up on your phone. So to be honest, no, but doing something like this really opens up what you can do, number one, but then how many opportunities are out there, not just in America, but in the whole world.
I was going to say, and it is then just kind of seizing it. It's like one of those ones where you kind of go, fair play, when you've kind of come from an environment where your friends or family haven't been, and you kind of taken that step and everything. It's one of those ones where it's like, well, yeah, it takes a bit, doesn't it? But the fact that you've then done it, you look back now and where it's kind of brought you just from taking that one opportunity. It's a wild type of ride.
Yeah,
isn't it?
props to my sister then for not going and then for me taking her place. But it's one of those things.
I could have been like podcasting with her now.
Oh man, but yeah, it's one of those things. I always see loads of people. I haven't done it myself, but they'll do like ski seasons, and then they'll go ahead and do a summer camp as well for the summer. So they'll literally do like seasonal work the whole year round, which is incredible.
Yeah, and they're the opportunities as well. The fact that once you then start hopping, going to different countries, once you've got the experience in one and you can show that you can work abroad and you can be versatile and you can adapt and you can take on new challenges in new environments with new cultures, you can then do that anywhere, can't you?
Definitely. I think one of the things that I haven't even touched on yet, and I always mention this to everyone over the phone too, is it's such a big thing for your CV.
Yeah.
Like it's huge. Like the amount of interviews I've been in and they would just mention straight away, like, what is this all about? Like, what have you done here? Like, talk to me about it. And then another thing is if you do a really good job at camp, you can ask for a camp director's reference.
Absolutely.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
Which is huge. And I think that really helped me out, not just for this job, but for previous jobs too. And I think it just goes such a long way.
Yeah.
Like everyone, before they head out to camp, they think, oh, I'll go there, I'll have an amazing time for 8 to 10 weeks, say. And they don't think about what positives it can have on your career moving forward with it. So being able to pop this down in your CV, because I don't care what job role you're going for, you're always going to catch somebody's eye if you've gone away for a summer in New York. It's always going to look good on paper.
You see it, yeah.
And then getting that camp director's reference too is huge. So I think that's something, looking back at it, I'm so glad I did it for not just one summer, but for 6, just because you can get that and then helps you out loads in the future.
That's a really cool one, because I've always mentioned that in regards to on a CV, it looks great.
Yeah.
I think you should flip it as well, kind of go, oh, well, if you were going to hire someone for your own business and you've got to go through 20, 30 CVs a day, if you see someone that's worked in America who's kind of worked with kids and stuff, that's great. But the really interesting part you've mentioned there is in regards to like the references and stuff as well. So do you feel that you're kind of more of almost a more rounded professional as well, because you've got all these different professional benefits which have come from summer camp, which you never initially thought was gonna?
Definitely. And I think it just shows like employers that you're adventurous, that you want to go off your own back to go and work in a different country.
Shows a lot.
And if you can, as you mentioned, like you touched on a little bit there, if you can get a reference from somebody in a different country who's high up as a camp director, it shows that you're able to adapt in a way, because it's not like you've popped down the road and you're going to work in a different company or in a different store. It's you've gone, not just adapted to a different job, you've adapted to a different way of life, a different country, a different like cultural experience too. So I think that's huge. And just touching on that, I think it is quite a big cultural shock to begin with.
Yeah.
But if you come out the other end of it and you've done, if you've done like a really positive job, then I think again that's going to help loads.
Absolutely. I don't think I could have rounded it up any better myself, to be honest. So first off, Matt, nice one, mate, for having a bit of a chat and everything. One thing I do is kind of towards the end of every single podcast, I'll kind of say, look, if we can round it up, if people essentially didn't want to listen to the old 40 minutes odd and they kind of go,
just skip to the end.
Yeah, give us 5 points, Matt, that you can round not just camp up, but the impact that it has as well. Kind of what would be your 5 that you'd consider?
I would say one of the things is just the memories that you will get, because not just at camp, but traveling memories, being on the top of Zion National Park, being at the Grand Canyon, being in San Francisco. That is something I will remember until the day I die.
Love that.
So it's something that will stay with you for the rest of your life. So I think that's a huge thing for me.
100%.
Another one, number 2, I'd say just how much I grew as a person. I don't think I'd be the person I am today or in this position if I didn't do it. So to everyone kind of like watching it, the millions watching at home, it's like, it's just go ahead and do it, just because you're going to grow so much more as a person. So just personal growth, I think that's another big thing. And just touching on again, third one is just how many kind of like doors it will open. We just touched on it then, didn't we, in regards to like moving forward with it, like careers. It's
sure.
Putting it down on your CV, getting that on a reference. There's a lot of things, not just with summer camp in America, but just anything really abroad, doing something a little bit different, adapting to it, and then coming out the other end. So I think opening up opportunities and just having that sort of opportunity was a big thing. I mentioned it with travel, so I won't mention that one. We're on 3, aren't we? You can edit this one out, Byron. Let me think of another one. So 1, 2, 3. I haven't mentioned friends, have I? Start being another one.
Good. That's a very good one, actually.
Yeah, and then the 4th one would be like the friendships I've made, because I say this to everyone on the phone. It's you'll make friendships from all over the world. So if I wanted to stay somewhere in Europe, for instance, I could. If I wanted to stay somewhere like New Zealand, Australia, I'll have friends there too. So you can easily couch surf. So I think that's
saves you some money on the accommodation.
Exactly. I always say to everyone, like, when you go to camp, you'll make friends from all over the world. And if you want to go to a different country, you'll be able to hit up somebody up. So I think just friends for life, but then friends all over the world.
Yeah.
I think that's another big one.
I think you've got one more.
Yeah. Let me think.
And it can be anything to do with camp, whether it's getting through the tough times, whether it's sort of what about the good times, embracing what camp can be.
Yeah, I would just say coming out, like getting out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Like if I was in a big group of like 20 or 30 people and I got asked to say something before camp, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Just because there's so many opportunities at camp where you can come out of your comfort zone, whether it's just doing a dance in front of a group of people, doing an activity as well. So I think just being pushed out your comfort zone is another one. I think that helped me out leaps and bounds after camp 2. So that'll be my 5th one.
Love it.
Got there in the end.
No, yeah. Well, do you know what? I don't think there's any better one to end it on, because I would say exactly the same. When it comes to camp, it's push yourself out of your comfort zone. And if you do so, you're going to grow a hell of a lot from it. So no better place to leave it than there. But yeah, mate, thanks very much.
I really enjoyed it.
It's the most serious conversation we've ever had, hasn't it? Like,
yeah. Well, yeah, it's usually just chatting about the football or joking around. But I absolutely loved it. It's something, as I said, I do every day on the phone. So if you can just sit down and just relax for a little bit for half an hour, 45 minutes and chat about camp, then yeah,
absolutely,
that's what I've done.
Well, like your sister mentioned that you'd be good for camp and everything. If anyone's kind of been to camp now and they've got friends or family that think that could benefit from it as well, I'd certainly ring up, have a chat with Matt, because I mean, hear you on the phones every day, mate. The amount of passion you've got for it and stuff, there's no better person to have a chat, you and Chris especially. So yeah, make sure you get your application in, give these guys a call, have a chat and go from there. But yeah, aside from that, thanks, man, for sitting down. It's been good. And yeah, hopefully get you on again soon.
Nice one.
All the best.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for watching the Camp Leaders podcast. If you enjoyed it, pop us a like and be sure to follow and subscribe for more of the same.